Hello, fanatics. It's Sunday, and you know what that means? True crime story time. Indeedy, it is true crime story time. So, yeah, I am working on Leona. She is part of the Break the Silence featured images. I know, I'm working on her early because I want to show her completed. So you get to see what she looks like. So, yeah, this is 50 by 50 in rounds. And doesn't she look gorgeous? So this is by Shalayarius. She is available now in my store in the Break the Silence category that I've made specially. So, I do believe, I'm in England, and I do believe it's Labour Day weekend in America. I have no real knowledge of what that means. I just know that there are a lot of Labour Day sales, therefore it must be Labour Day weekend, right? Makes sense. Well, I found a true crime, that is related to Labour Day. How much, I don't know. But yeah, this is the story of Leonard Tyburski. I want to say, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I will stick to Leonard. Okay. True crime story time. This one is a bit seedy, to say the least. Okay, so if you are into true crime and you're into diamond painting, please do hit that subscribe button not to miss out on future episodes. You can always hit the bell to be notified of any upcoming videos. Grab your project. Come join me. Grab a drink. And we'll be here until we get through this. I will be putting my tuppence worth in along the way, okay? Because, you know, I kind of have to. Okay. Just after Labour Day in 1985, 42-year-old Leonard Tyburski was excited about the new school year. Summer had just come to a close, classes had begun, and he was getting to know his new students. The prior year, he had been promoted to Dean of Students and Chief Disciplinary Officer at Mackenzie High School in the eastern suburbs of Detroit. Leonard had worked for the Detroit School District for over 20 years, and in only a few more years he could retire. Leonard met Dorothy Barker when he was 21 and working as a biology teacher. She was 16 years old, a sophomore in his class that had a crush on her handsome teacher. Her persistent flirting was more than he could resist, and the two of them began a romantic relationship. Okay, don't agree with that, but okay. Although they were only 5 years apart in age, a student-teacher romantic relationship violated school policy. I think it violated more than that, but for a time they hid their taboo relationship, but they didn't want to live like that. With Leonard's promise of love and financial support, Dorothy dropped out of high school so they could keep their love affair alive. I would say that was red flag and number one. Why did she have to drop out? After 3 years of dating in 1967, Dorothy was of legal age and married Leonard. Dorothy's family didn't approve of the relationship from the very beginning. They knew Leonard and Dorothy weren't a good fit. Leonard was a controlling young man that didn't want his wife to work. Red flag number 2. He was old-fashioned and obsessed with cleanliness and order. In his eyes, a woman's job was to keep the house spotless. So that's exactly what she did. Red flag number 3. Leonard did his best to keep Dorothy to himself and away from her family. Red flag number 4. He often intercepted phone calls from family members telling them she's not here, she's busy doing her chores. Her family members had their suspicions about abuse in the relationship early on when they noticed occasional bruises on Dorothy's arms. Do I need to say it? No. Once she showed up to visit with a black eye. However, Dorothy always had an excuse, so they never really knew for sure. Dorothy and Leonard's first daughter, Kelly, was born after 3 years of marriage. 3 years later came their second daughter, Kim. As far back as the girls could remember, there were constant arguments, objects being thrown across the room, pushing, screaming, and name-calling. Kim did her best to avoid the confrontations. She retreated to her bedroom and rarely came out. She had her own television, telephone, and stereo, and even kept food in her room. Kelly, however, found herself in the middle of the disputes, usually taking her mother's side. Dorothy was a sociable young woman who liked to chat with everyone. Her friendly demeanour made Leonard jealous, and he often told the girls that their mother was having affairs with other men. When Dorothy was in her late 20s, he accused her of an affair with a 65-year-old pet shop owner. Quote, "There are others too," he would tell the girls. A man that she bred rabbits with, while another was a local pharmacist. Whether there was any truth to these accusations, the girls were never certain. I would say not. But, Leonard and Dorothy owned an attractive ranch-style home in a nice neighbourhood in suburban Detroit. She kept the home and yard immaculate, but that was not enough. Although Leonard's career was doing well, 17 years of marriage had taken its toll on their relationship, and it was quickly spiralling down the drain. In 1984, Dorothy's sister, Lorraine, died in a car crash. Lorraine had been her best friend throughout her life, and the two shared everything. The loss devastated Dorothy. Leonard, however, never appreciated the relationship between the two women. He knew Dorothy talked to her sister behind his back. When Lorraine died, he had no sympathy for his wife and her loss. He seemed happy about it because he could have his wife all to himself. As a result, Dorothy fell into a deep depression. She wrote somber poetry and penned heartbreaking letters to her sister. The following year, Kelly turned 17 and Kim 14. The girls were teenagers and had their own lives outside of the home. 37-year-old Dorothy felt alone and lethargic. Bored with suburban life, she felt as if she had missed out on so much by dropping out of high school and marrying so young. And she's 35, 37. Wow. Throughout 1985, Dorothy and Leonard argued most of the time they were together, but the problems in the household took an uncomfortable turn for the worse when Kelly started dating a new boy, Craig Albright. Craig and Kelly had worked together at the local Hardee's fast food restaurant. He was an attractive, muscled, young 18-year-old, and when Kelly brought him home to meet her parents, Dorothy took an instant liking to the boy. Perhaps Craig was the type of boy she wished she had dated when she was Kelly's age. Each time Craig came to the house to visit Kelly, Dorothy made herself available. Kelly noticed a change in her mother's behaviour. Dorothy chatted endlessly with the young couple and unashamedly invited herself to tag along on their dates, often going to the movies and restaurants with them. Suddenly, the couple had become a threesome, and the relationship between Kelly and her mother deteriorated. I'm not surprised. Dorothy became possessive of the young man and would get upset at Kelly if Craig didn't come over to visit. Leonard also noticed the drastic change in Dorothy as well. Their constant arguing had come to a pinnacle, and Dorothy didn't seem to hide her attraction to Craig at all. In fact, she was shoving it in Leonard's face. She taunted him every chance she could. When Craig had problems at his own home, his parents kicked him out of the house. Dorothy jumped at the opportunity to help and suggested he move in with them. He could stay on the couch until he could find another place to live. Leonard reluctantly agreed. Immediately after moving in, however, Craig noticed the simmering tension in the house. Leonard often yelled at Dorothy or the girls in front of him as if he wasn't even there. Over the following 3 weeks, Dorothy aggressively pursued Craig. She ran around the house in her underwear, begging him to touch her. "Come on, are you chicken?" Though she hid her advances from her daughter, she didn't care one bit if Leonard saw. She wanted him to see. Eventually, Leonard approached Kelly and accused her mother of sleeping with Craig. Although she had her suspicions and had noticed her mother clinging to her boyfriend, Kelly swept the accusation aside. Craig would never do that to her. Her mother would never do that to her. But it didn't take long for the boy to give in to the sexual advances of 37-year-old Dorothy. After a long day at the Michigan State Fair, Dorothy, Kelly and Craig stopped the car in the parking lot to get some rest. As Kelly slept in the front seat, Dorothy quietly climbed into the back seat and had sex with Craig. They had sex an additional time at their home, but Craig felt guilty for sleeping with his girlfriend's mom. When Dorothy propositioned him a third time, he turned her down. Dorothy didn't take the rejection well. When Kelly came home from work on the evening of September 22nd in 1985, she found her mum at the kitchen table writing something on a piece of paper. Her father sat in the family room silently brooding. There was noticeable tension in the air, but they weren't speaking. When Kelly asked her mother what was going on, she replied, quote, I have something I want you to sign when I'm done. I took a bunch of pills and I'm going to die, end quote. Kelly started crying hysterically and screamed at her father to call an ambulance. Unfazed, he rolled his eyes and didn't move. When Dorothy finished writing, she pushed the paper in front of Kelly. It was an impromptu last will and testament, stating that she wanted the insurance money that she had inherited after her sister's death to be placed into a trust. She specifically wanted the trust to be controlled by her friend Linda, not by Leonard. It also stated that Leonard was the fault for her suicide. Kelly screamed at her mother and screamed at her father, but it was no use. The young girl felt she was somehow to blame for her mother's anguish. Kelly ran across the street to the neighbour Linda's house and pounded on the door. Kelly explained the situation to Linda, who initially thought it was a joke, but she soon realised the seriousness of the situation and called 911. When Kelly returned to the house, Dorothy had disappeared, and Leonard made no effort to stop her from leaving. He still sat in the living room undisturbed. Police and paramedics found her half a mile away, passed out in a bank parking lot. The ambulance rushed Dorothy to the hospital to have her stomach pumped. When she regained consciousness, Kelly and Craig visited her in the hospital room. Dorothy told Kelly that she loved her and kissed her on the cheek, but when Craig bent down to hug her, she kissed him full on the lips. Craig was markedly surprised and felt uncomfortable at the gesture. Kelly stood dumbfounded and realised that her mother was obsessed with her teenage boyfriend. 4 days later, Craig Albright was in the drive of the family home, washing his car, when Leonard came outside to speak to him. Leonard asked him to leave for 30 minutes or so because he needed to have a discussion with Dorothy. Craig knew that meant they were going to have another argument. Craig got in his car and went for a long drive. Leonard walked back into the house and confronted Dorothy as she prepared dinner. He was sure she was having an affair and accused her of having sex with Craig, who was almost half her age. Side note, she was 16 and he was 42. So, yeah. Defiantly, Dorothy admitted her affair and screamed at Leonard, I love him. Craig's a man. You're not. Leonard's blood boiled and he flew into a rage, but Dorothy continued to taunt him. You're just a wimp, a punk. You can't satisfy me like he can. Dorothy's emasculating comments continued as she headed down the stairs to the basement to get meat out of the freezer for dinner. At the bottom of the stairs, the couple continued to scream at each other. Dorothy told Leonard, "I want you out of the house. I don't love you anymore. You need to move out." Leonard slapped her, and she took a swing at him with a butcher's knife that she had carried from the kitchen. Leonard's mind exploded in anger as he grabbed her head and slammed it into the metal pillar that supported the home. The first blow knocked her unconscious, but he continued to beat her head against it over and over. He smashed her head into the post 11 times until she was slumped on the floor, covered in blood. In a stupor of what he had done, Leonard walked back up the stairs to his bedroom, washed up, changed his clothes, all the while thinking that maybe when he went back down the stairs, she'd be fine. Maybe it never happened. But it did. He went back into the basement, opened the chest freezer, dropped her body on top of the frozen hamburger, and twisted the lock. When Craig returned to the house an hour later, Leonard met him in the driveway. Leonard was furious. Quote, "Get the fudge out of here. Dorothy took off and you're not welcome here. Don't come back." Craig, of course, assumed correctly that Leonard had found out about the shenanigans with his wife. "Shit, just let me get my clothes." Leonard replied, "If you step foot in that house, I'll fudging kill you." Frustrated, Craig punched the side mirror of his own car, gouging his arm, before he climbed back into his car and drove off. Craig drove to the Hardys, where Kelly had been working. He was so flustered he could barely speak. Quote, "Your mum and dad got into another fight or something. He kicked me out and won't even let me into the house to get my clothes. I think he thinks something's going on between me and your mum mum's gone." End quote. Just then, the phone at the Hardys rang. It was Leonard. Quote, "Don't talk to Craig. I don't want you hanging around him. Your mother and I got into a fight. I need you to come home right now, then go to Grandma's." End quote. Kelly had never heard her father that angry. Too scared to speak to him, Kelly picked up Kim and went straight to their grandmother's house. Right away, Leonard began spreading the seeds of Dorothy's mysterious disappearance. Just minutes after killing her, he walked across the street to Linda's house and told her that Dorothy had been having an affair with Craig and that she'd left him. In the following days, he told Dorothy's family that she had run off with another man and was living in a houseboat in Monroe, Michigan, or Toledo, Ohio. Dorothy's family had their doubts about Leonard's story, as did Kelly. At Kelly's insistence, Leonard reluctantly filed a missing persons report with the Canton police 4 days after the incident. But when Kelly read the newspaper account of the police report, it confused her why her father told the police that Kim was the last person to see her mother. The article also said that Dorothy had a history of leaving home. Kelly knew that neither of those statements were true. Leonard told Kelly that he had watched Dorothy go out the door. The article also mentioned that Dorothy left a large sum of money. Kelly knew, however, that her father never let Dorothy carry more than $30 or $40 at a time. Police were suspicious of Leonard's explanation, but when he passed a lie detector test, they wrote it off as just another woman leaving her husband. Kelly and Craig had stopped dating in the days after Dorothy went missing. Over the following months, Kelly fell into a depression, not because of the breakup, but because she somehow blamed herself for her mother's disappearance. Leonard had encouraged her self-imposed blame by telling her he had spoken to her mother, who told him she didn't want to speak to her daughters. She told me she was mad at you. To pacify Dorothy's family and daughters, Leonard had claimed that Dorothy had called him, asking him to bring her some clothes. He claimed he met her at a rest area just south of Detroit and brought her clothes that she asked for. Again, Kelly had her suspicions. Kelly knew Kim left for school every day after her father left for work, and she got back from school before him as well. Kim rarely left the house. She would have known if her mother had called. As the months passed, Kelly enrolled in a school 90 miles away at Michigan State University. Not a day passed that she hadn't thought of her mother and why she hadn't called. Even though she had met another man, why hadn't she called her daughters or her own brother and sister? Why would she have missed Kelly's high school graduation? The unanswered questions haunted her. Leonard worked hard to pit his two daughters against one another. Kim, still living at home, kept quiet, spending most of her time in her bedroom. To reward her, he showered her with gifts like a 1,500 drum set she kept in the basement. Without knowing, it was just a few feet from her mother's frozen body. Kelly, however, was still inquisitive. Leonard often complained of how much her schooling was costing him and protested every time she called home. He had to pay the long-distance phone bill. By the fall of 1988, Kelly's depression worsened. She couldn't eat or sleep. She had lost over 20 pounds. When she managed to sleep, she often dreamt of her mother. In her dreams, she saw her mother silently hunched over in a chair. Kelly would try to run to her, but she couldn't move. In her dreams, she could sense that her mother was mad. Over the Thanksgiving holiday, Kelly went home to spend the holiday with Kim and her father. During her stay, Kelly cooked for the family and went down to the basement freezer. Kelly loved the stuffed cabbage that her mother used to make, and it was something she had often served for Thanksgiving dinner. Maybe her mother had left some in the freezer. But when Kelly reached for the key to the freezer that usually hung on a hook on the wall, it was missing. When she asked her father where the key was, his response was, "Your mother took it when she left." An odd response, Kelly thought, Why on earth would her mother leave without clothes but take a key to the chest freezer? Kelly returned to finish the year at school, then returned home again the following month for Christmas. Although they no longer dated, Kelly still kept in touch with Craig. When he heard she was in town for the winter break, he invited her to a New Year's Eve party. At the party, Kelly told Craig about the dreams of her mother and the strange incident with the freezer key. She said something just didn't seem right about the freezer being locked for 3.5 years. Why wouldn't her father have just popped the lock off? It all seemed very strange. Craig agreed and suggested, "Why don't you just get a screwdriver and pry it open?" Kelly jokingly replied, "Yeah, Dad probably put her in there, right?" Oh dear. On January 2nd, 1989, Kelly was packing her bag to return to school, but all she could think about was the conversation she had with Craig about the freezer. Kelly crept down the basement stairs and stared at the lock on the freezer. Craig's suggestion stuck in her head. She paused for a minute. Then she searched her father's nearby toolbox and pulled out a large screwdriver and a paint lid remover. Upstairs, Kim sat in her bedroom and could hear the loud pounding coming from the basement. Leonard had gone to an electronics store to buy a new set of stereo speakers, so she knew the banging wasn't coming from her father. Moments later, she heard the fast thud, thud, thud of someone running up the basement stairs. Kelly burst into Kim's room and screamed, "Oh my God, Mum's in the freezer! Mum's in the freezer!" "What? I found Mum in the freezer." Both their hearts pounded with fear and shock. Leonard was due home any minute. The girls knew that if their father saw that they had opened the freezer, they might end up like their mother. Moments later, Leonard walked in the back door. Restraining themselves, the girls remained composed as they spoke to their father for the next several minutes. Craig had planned to drive Kelly back to school that afternoon and arrived an hour after the girls found their mother's body. As Craig walked into the house, Kelly whispered, "Act like nothing has happened." "Why?" he whispered back. "Because I just found Mum," she replied. Kelly and Kim got into the car and Craig drove to the police station. They didn't want to be anywhere near the house when the police arrived. Leonard Tyburski was arrested and charged with murder. He confessed to killing his wife. He claimed they were arguing. She went down the stairs to get something out of the freezer and he followed. She had a butcher's knife in one hand and a fork in the other. She swung the knife at him, then threw it at him, all the while shouting emasculating remarks. Quote, "She kept yelling and saying that Craig satisfied her and I didn't, and she kept looking at me and calling me a wimp, a punk, and a bar stool." Yeah. It's YouTube. I don't know what I can get away with. Leonard explained he flew into a rage and slammed her head into the vertical metal support beam. He then claimed that Dorothy stumbled backwards and fell into the freezer. Leonard told detectives that she fell half in, half out of the freezer, but she was still breathing and conscious. He then went upstairs, washed the blood off himself, came back downstairs, and she was dead. Detectives easily disapproved this story. Dorothy's head had been smashed 11 times, which would have easily killed her. She also had a broken index finger, defensive wounds on her forearms, and multiple bruises on her face, chest, and shoulders. Because there was no evidence of premeditation, the judge ruled that the prosecution was limited to a charge of manslaughter or second-degree murder. Leonard Tyburski was charged and convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison. In November 1994, however, his conviction was overturned on a technicality. Rather than go through another trial, Leonard pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. After serving only 10 years, Leonard was released from prison. After his release, Leonard returned to his childhood home in Pennsylvania to live with his elderly parents. In interviews with the press, Leonard said, quote, "I went through hell. That was a bad part of my life. I want to forget about it. People commit crimes and are punished for it. I've paid for what I did." End quote. He lived off his Detroit School District pension until his death in 2014. Kim, the younger daughter, stuck by her father's side during his trial, prison sentence, and afterwards. Kelly, however, was much less supportive. In the years after his release, Kelly warmed up to him somewhat, but only described her relationship with her father as fine. Wow. I mean, wow. He really was a control freak. I mean, I guess we only have their say-so that Craig would have confirmed, wouldn't he, that it actually did happen. The affair did happen. But even so, I mean, I get it in a fit of rage, but 11 times? Like, And to have her in the freezer all that time. I thought they had to go to Grandma's so he got rid of the body. I mean, I don't know how he would have done that. Some true crime people would have dismembered, I guess, to make it easier or something. But no, he just left her in there for over 3 years. And the kids never knew. Okay, so, update. I was kind of wondering how it went from 20 to 40 down to him serving 10 years. And I mean, really? So, he served 5 years when he was sentenced to 20 to 40. And then he apologised for the crime that shocked the world. And after one daughter wrote a letter, she was 21 years old when she wrote this letter, and it was the younger daughter, Kim. And I believe the judge ruled after he read this out aloud. "I loved my mother very much. but a jail term of 20 years will not bring her back. It is no solace to me, it just brings more grief. And she called him a good father. So he ruled that he could be paroled in 3 years. And it was thrown out on a technicality. The crime was reported worldwide. I don't know how I would feel. I can't even imagine. But I don't think I'd be wanting my dad out of prison anytime soon. Do you know what I mean? After taking away my mum. It is strange. And she was 21. It's not like, you know, she kind of depended on him, I guess. But she stood by him. She stood by him all that time. So there you go. There is the very tragic story of Dorothy Barker. Yeah, it's very, very sad. And he's out living his life, doing whatever he's doing now. He reckons he paid for his crime. I say not so much. I'm sorry, scratch that. Leonard Tyburski, 71, passed away on Thursday, November the 6th in 2014. He passed away. He had 2 daughters, Kelly and Kim. So there you go. He did pass away at 71. I think he was 50 odd when he committed the crime. So, yeah. Doesn't say much else other than that. But, yeah. He has passed away since. So there you go. Thank you so much for joining me. Please, as always, leave your comments and thoughts down below. And I look forward to spending next Sunday with you. We'll do another true crime. Feel free to join me on my Monday night live tomorrow at 8 p.m. And have a wonderful rest of your evening. And as always, stay safe out there. And I'll be seeing you very, very soon. Bye.